Hello. Hello. Okay, good. Let's see. Well, it's time for me. I'm going to go ahead and get started because my presentation is a lot longer than my time. So I'll probably buzz through a lot of it. If you have any questions afterwards, let me know. Or if you want to hit me before I hit lunch, let me know. Before we get started, I have this, that's wet. I have this tradition. I always pass out marshmallows at my talks. So I'll pass them around. My recommendation is, if I get caught on a topic and start diving into it too deep, throw them at me. I have a tendency to do that. If I'm just fine, don't throw them at me. But you can eat them, so pass them around. Okay, so I'm nervous if you can't tell. Who am I? Well, that's a pseudonym. The reason I use a pseudonym is not because I care that anyone knows my name, just that I work with some folks who are indexing videos. This is being recorded, and the last thing I want is for I try to keep a low profile, so as little of my name that goes out on the internet is good with me. Stuff I've done, I've been in IT for a long time, about 30 years. I've done just about everything you can do as a defender, even written physical security plans. That was fun, that took a whole year. But basically if it's a defender tool, I've probably installed it, configured it, run it. Here is my disclaimer. I don't speak for my employer or their clients or anyone who may be their clients or may have been their clients. I'm not even sure I believe what I'm saying. It's just my opinion right now. That can change without prior notice. So if you catch me afterwards and convince me I'm wrong, I'm okay with that. My talk is titled The Little Dutch Boy. For those that don't know the story, it's about a small boy in the Netherlands on his way to school. He saw a leak in the dam that kept the water from his town. And he put his finger in the dam and sometime later some workers came by, repaired the dam. The story's told to show that a very small leak in a very large thing can turn out to be far more devastating than one would think. For any of you defenders out there, you know that the bad guys can sometimes get in with through a very small hole, and when they do, they can often affect a lot of damage. So what I'm going to blather on about, talk is cut in two pieces. Our current security dam, the thing that keeps the bad guys out and the good stuff in, firewalls that we use to help make this happen, IDSs, and file integrity. And then I'm going to talk about a tool that I've written called Omens. It's a web server sentry. Actually, the young man who wrote an article about me for Tripwire named it a sentry, and I think that's a really good term. I call it a continuous monitoring tool. It can be used for a lot of things, but we'll cover what it does to sort of plug these holes that exist in our current security systems. So let's talk about the current security dam. This is what it looks like. Actually, there's a lot more to this. We have network intrusion detection, file integrity monitoring, firewalls, web filtering, system development life cycles. We do static code analysis. We do vulnerability scanning and patching and antivirus. And all of this sort of forms the thing that we piece together into this dam to keep the bad guys out and the good stuff in. I'm just going to talk about three pieces today. If I talked about all of this, it would be a week, and nobody wants to listen to me for that long, I'm sure. So I'm going to talk about network intrusion detection, file integrity monitoring, and firewalls. Okay, so first, firewalls. This we typically say hard and crunchy on the outside, soft and chewy on the inside. This is on our perimeter. It's a choke point in the network, so if our firewall is not sized large enough, or if we're asking more of our firewall than we initially thought we would, the firewall won't be able to keep up with the traffic. Also, SSL is a challenge. For those that may not have heard this term, crunchy on the outside, soft and chewy, center, just basically means that it's hard to get past it, but once you're inside, the world is your oyster. We typically, when we think of firewalls, historical firewalls, we're talking about IP firewalls, right? Five tuples or tuples, however they say that. Source, port, and destination. Source port, destination port, source IP address, destination IP address, and then what protocol it's going to pass or not pass, TCP/IP, UDP, ICMP. This used to be really cool when everything had its own port and protocol and port and protocol. So you're running a bulletin board, right? Okay, NNTP port 119. You don't want NNTP on your network, you block port 119, great. SMTP port 25, reading mail, POP3, port 110, or 143 for IMAP. So it used to be really cool that you could just basically say, okay, I don't want that on my network. That all changed because basically what people started doing is tunneling inside of HTTPS, but then we didn't even have to do that anymore because everything's moving to HTTP and HTTPS anyways. So Gmail, it's just HTTP, or Facebook, or IRC, we used to do port 6667. Now we have all these chat clients that run across regular HTTP. So since we're not blocking all these ports anymore, things are just coming in through HTTP or HTTPS, we need for the firewall to be more aware of what that traffic actually is, right? So we move towards WAFs and next generation firewalls. These are firewalls that understand the traffic. They understand, they can better integrate with your network. Some you can manage the permissions through Active Directory. It adds application awareness. And this is a movement past what we used to call an application firewall. I installed the first application firewall, my first application firewall, 14 years ago. Proxy application firewalls are not new, but this is sort of the next step in understanding, okay, this is what this traffic is, and even though it's all on port 80, some of it is this and some of it is this. So essentially what we're talking about is a firewall and a network intrusion detection system put together. So let's talk about IDS. Common and effective tool, excellent. Just, I mean, one of the really most useful security tools. But these are typically network-based appliances. They sit on your network. They monitor and scan packets coming in and out. They are often very robust, but sometimes the language is complex. Like, you don't just install a NIDS and start writing signatures. At least, and I don't know anybody that does that. So one of the first things we run into is, okay, this is an appliance that sits on your network. If it's not sitting on the segment that you want to monitor, you have to have a sensor on that segment. So we have to place these sensors at critical points in our network to be able to see what's going on in those parts of the network. So essentially, for a NIDS to work, you have to have traffic. Now, that sounds kind of silly, right? Of course, you have to have traffic. But it turns out that in the real world, when you're looking at intrusions, that can be a real blind spot. So what could possibly go wrong, right? Well, first of all, NIDS signatures are not typically generic. Now, what do I mean by that? So NID signatures don't target a server. Now, it turns out that looking at a specific server and what should be on that server is really useful for not only that server, for what's going on in your whole network. And I'll cover that in a minute. So these signatures are generally targeted to look for generally bad traffic. And that's because it just doesn't make a lot of sense, or it's too much work to write a NID signature, a set of NID signatures for every server on your network. So you're looking for generally bad things. It's very hard to target what I call not signatures, and I'll talk about that in a minute, what I mean by not signatures. Signatures are not geared towards ad hoc deployment. So if you have an evolving threat, you go to your guy and say, hey, we've got this evolving threat, we need a NID signature for that. The last time I tried to do that, what I heard was it'll take me about a week to create that signature. That was not useful for me. Ad hoc signatures, and there's a good reason for that, I'm not bashing that. There's a good reason why you want to make sure your signatures are not going to all of a sudden fire off gobs and gobs of false positives. So the next thing we run into is that signatures are typically not shared. Now this is sort of the thing that I'm passionate about, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. Sometimes looking at an evolving threat, a very narrow signature would be very useful. So a 0-day comes out, your organization is attacked, you create a signature for this, okay, great. Okay, now another division is attacked. They create another signature. Another organization in your sector is attacked. They create another signature, right? So you have all these people creating signatures when signatures already exist, they're just not shared. And this is something that I am hoping, I'm seeing changes in the industry now, but I'm hoping this will really change, because I think this is the key to really addressing this problem. And again, sometimes the bad guys move so fast, you don't have a day, you don't have a week, you certainly don't have a month to detect and put in mitigations. At that point, they're already crawling all over your network. So what I'm trying to say is that attacks scale really well. 1 0-day, if nobody's sharing any signatures, 1 0-day can affect a multitude of organizations. So without sharing, the defense does not scale well. Everybody has to do the same work over and over again. I just throw the question out there. I have some of what I think are the answer. I won't explore it here. But why is sharing so feared in our industry? Why is it, I have some ideas. None of them are very popular. But I think we should be asking ourselves this question. Because the bad guys, they share really good. If you've ever done an intrusion and you've looked at some of the open source intelligence and said, well, I wonder if this has happened anywhere else, you find the exact code that's on your network. It's all over the place. It isn't new, right? You're looking at Google code or, it eludes me now, but lots of this code is posted all over the internet. Pastebin, thank you very much. Yes, you're probably going to find that whatever on your system is on Pastebin. So this is a lot. So we're going to talk about what I call not signatures, right? It turns out that since NIDs can look at the traffic going in and out of your network, that's useful. The problem is NIDs can't tell you what actually happened on the server, right? What if there's no traffic at all? What if you're not monitoring that segment? What if there's no sensor on that segment? What if it's SSL and you're not doing SSL decryption? I know that this is available. I know how it works. I just don't really know anybody that's doing this really well. I mean, I'm sure there are, and I don't know about them, but SSL decryption is really hard to do. It's hard to do well. What if it's an unmonitored segment or a blocked segment, right? Okay, so nobody would bring in a wireless router and put it on your network and have traffic behind that router, right? So what if the traffic looks like it's normal? What if it's encoded? This I see a lot. Base64 encoding, ROT13, right? Just obfuscating the data. The Commons crew, this is what now has come to be known as APT1, but these guys sort of became famous because their command and control servers were receiving commands through what looked like web pages with Base64 encoding inside of a comment. So on the network, it's just going to look like regular traffic. What if your application lies to you? Now we're, again, starting to see more of this. If the traffic is being monitored by, okay, the server is owned, it's receiving, let's say it's a web shell. If the request coming in is coming from an internal IP address, oh, just act normal. You see a lot of this in black hat SEO to try and fool the search engines. But if it's coming from hacker X, okay, now do this other thing. So NIDS is, in this case, going to be very hard to detect traffic that is basically not seen. So let me talk about not signatures. Let's say you have a server that is running an ASP application, a web server running an ASP application, right? Should that server ever see PHP traffic on it? A request for an administration page for PHP admin or any other common CMS written in PHP, your server should never see that, right? But you're not sure from a NIDS level, from the network, if you've got 200 servers on your network and you're not managing all of those servers, you're not sure, maybe I should see that traffic. So this concept works amazingly well. If you're looking on that server and you see a request for PHP admin on that server, and you're not running PHP, well, there's a good chance that that IP address is scanning your network for something else. So now, okay, I have a piece of information. I know this IP address is scanning at least this server. What else is it scanning on my network? So that little piece of information based on something that should not be there, what a lot of people are calling the anomalies, although this isn't anomalous behavior really, it's just not a request that should be in your log. So what if your admin console is exposed to the internet? This happens a lot too. You install a CMS, the default is, yeah, sure, the admin console too, come and get it. So you have to go and actually lock that down at the server and say, no, if you're not this IP address, you cannot access the admin console. But if you haven't done that, so now your admin console is exposed to the internet. What if it's a compromised password, right? What if you've reused that password from another system that's been compromised? What if it's a bypass, remote, arbitrary file upload, or authentication bypass? So it can look like normal traffic, and your NIDS may not, your network intrusion detector may not flag on it. It can appear to be acceptable. That's really a bad term. I couldn't think of a better way to say it's just not flagged as hostile. So by default, if it's not hostile, then it's acceptable. Right? So once the bad guy gets inside, really, really bad, they may no longer be traversing your perimeter. Okay? They may have installed a proxy. This could be, a service running on your Windows box. It may be a web shell. These web shells, by the way, are kind of the thing I'm really interested in. Been doing a lot of sort of looking at that. And what this can look like is you have this application, your box has been owned, a web shell's been loaded onto the box. The bad guy is sending base 64 encoded strings as input into your web shell. Just looks like random stuff coming through your network, right? No real signature. Web shell gets it, decodes it, and then takes some action based on that. What if the bad guy is using out-of-band methods, right? They're proxying through other things, DNS proxy, right? So the key to take away here is persistence. This magic persistence is really just all about hiding. It's about putting something on a server and just leaving it there. You may be, the bad guy may be using it, they may not. They may just want to put it there and leave it there to reestablish control if whatever else they've done is found out. So, problem with this traffic, the person may look like trusted traffic, file copying from one server to another, right? Are we really worried about that? It may be SSL again, or it might be custom encrypted. Hex0A, XOR Hex0A. Nothing complicated, just meant to bypass the intrusion detection system. So, does it look like normal use, or is the bad guy using countermeasures, stuff that I haven't even seen or know about? I certainly don't know all the countermeasures that can be used, but I'm sure there are many yet to be discovered. So the key here, NIDS needs network traffic. So NIDS won't detect if there are file changes. Like one of the best things to know if your box has a bad guy on it is there a file changed on this box? So this is why we have file integrity checkers, right? So let's look at file integrity checkers. Very effective tool, but what's inside that file? Okay, was it a legitimate change? Was it done through change control? Did a bad guy change it? Did one of our programmers change it? Did an administrator put something new in there that he was asked to put in there? Is that code safe? Does it have eval in it? Now, who gets notified of this? Does IT security get notified if there's a file change? Typically, yes. Does the programmer get notified? Does the system administrator get notified if there's a change on file server? Not always. These guys are often the guys that you really want to ask. The developer gets a message, file's been changed on the file server. I didn't change any file. Okay, well, maybe we should go look at that file. This is my obligatory Sun Tzu quote. I'm told every security presentation has to have one. So let's talk about the way that we can sort of the way that we can augment existing security systems to look for some of these exposures, right? First thing we want to do, when your server's compromised or you think there might be some hostile traffic, where do you want to go? The logs. The logs tell the story. This is on the box. This is assuming that the bad guy hasn't already covered his tracks. This is going to tell you what transpired. Not just packets that came and went on the network, but what happened. You may be able to go back if you're doing full packet capture on your network. If you have a very large network, you're probably not. You may be doing partial packet capture, which is still useful. But if that data is no longer available, you're going to have a problem building a timeline and understanding what happened. So what are the things that the tool that I've written, it's called Omens, by the way, I forgot to mention that. Object Monitor for Enhanced Network Security. I picked that that acronym first, by the way, and then named it later because I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm going to admit that out front for posterity. So Omens is going to scan your logs. What's it going to scan for? Known vectors. It's going to scan for generic vectors, okay? An unmatched single quote. %27, okay? Somebody's sending %27. You see that in your log? Yeah. Might be okay, might not, probably not. We're going to scan for not vectors. Okay, I'm running Java server pages, and somebody's scanning for somebody's asking for a cold fusion page. That doesn't belong there. I want to see what else that person has done. Omens uses very simple search strings. If you could do a dir command on DOS, you can write an Omens search string. I kept them very simple on purpose. I'm very, very reticent to do anything more complicated because the idea is to be able for any person to just write a quick signature and say, I saw this, I want to see where else this is happening. It also supports false positives. I put the signature in, I got all these warnings and alerts, and yeah, look for that signature, but if it has this, don't look for that. So it's just meant to weed out the false positives. So the next thing Omens is going to do is it's going to scan the file system. This is on the box itself. This is a tool that's run host-based intrusion detection. So the next thing Omens is going to do is scan the file system. Were any files deleted? Were any files changed? Were any files added? Then it will open up that file. If there's a file added or changed on the network, if it's deleted, it's not going to open it up, obviously. But if there's a file that's been added or changed, Omens will open it up and it'll say, is there something in that file that looks really hostile? Is there time stopping in there? Did someone put some code in this? Is this a web shell? Someone put some code in here to change date stamps? Typically, a developer is not going to put code in their web app to do time stopping. So this is a clue that maybe this file doesn't belong here. Omens can check for hostile MD5s. These are marginally useful. I put it in because in a case where you might find some hostile code on your network, you could MD5 it, you can push that out, and other servers can scan for that. But what I find is that the bad guys change their code enough, and there's some really cool talks on taking existing compiled code and changing, a couple bytes in it, and it being undetectable through MD5. MD5 isn't really a good detection mechanism for this, but it can be useful in some cases. So it's in there. We're going to look for hostile file names. Again, not really that useful, but if you're looking at an emerging threat, you found this file on this server, I would like to know if that file is on other servers too. Very useful for a short time period, but useful nonetheless, especially if there's an emerging threat. The other thing that it's going to do, Omens is going to do, it's going to check for obfuscation. I see a lot of this, okay? Entire web shells written in base 64, all right? So the bad guys go, okay, you're going to look for base 64, fine. I'll just base 64 and then route 13 it. Or I'll base 64, route 13 it, I'll reverse it, base 64 it again. So the permutations are nearly endless. So what Omens attempts to do is just say, does this look like obfuscation? The detector's pretty good. On the stuff I've run it on, I'm getting 85–90% detection rates on all sorts of obfuscation. It's not perfect, but again, we just want a heads up. If it's painfully obvious, if the bad guy base 64 encoded it, reversed it, Omens will find it. Omens is going to check one of two ways to determine if a file has changed. It can either just check file dates and sizes. That's really fast. You can buzz through a server looking at file dates and sizes really quick. Unfortunately, the bad guys may time stop. They may change the file date back. They may edit the file in such a way that the file size stays the same. In this case, they're going to avoid detection. So Omens has the ability to hash it. This takes a little bit longer, but it's not crazy slow. On my server, I'm running a commercial CMS on it. It's about 5 minutes to hash the entire file system. So it's definitely usable. So what's Omens going to do with this? Well, it can syslog it if you've got a centralized, you're centrally looking at all your logs. It can email the report, and it can also encrypt it. The encryption's not meant to be unbreakable, super duper encryption. All we're trying to do is send email that is encrypted to give us a leg up over the bad guy. If the bad guy has already owned our email system. It's RC4, by the way. I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's not AES. And it is, this is symmetric encryption, it's not asymmetric. So you do have all of the vulnerabilities that you have with symmetric encryption. But I don't know if I'm going to talk about it later, but let me talk about it now. It's still useful to do this, even if the bad guy somehow owns the box and can modify your configuration. If they can change the password, you will still get an encrypted report, but it will be encrypted with the wrong password. So if you get a report and you can't decrypt it, it's an out-of-band way to say, hey, maybe somebody changed the password. So the encryption can be used for the typical, well, I'm encrypting this, but it can also be used as a way to sort of monitor in an out-of-band way if a bad guy has changed your configuration, the Omens configuration on the box. Now, the report can be emailed up to 10 people. Again, I have this this idea that I'm exploring about deputizing other people in other departments, right? So a lot of times, just IT security gets this information. But would it be useful for the sysadmin to have that information? Would it be useful for the developer to have that information? They're not an IT security person, but if there's a file changed on a server, the IT security guy probably is not in the best position to open up that file and look, did someone append a web shell to the bottom of my normally good code? Did a bad guy change a good program, a script, a web application, and add hostile code into it, right? The best guy to answer that question is going to be the developer. So I think that moving more people that are not in IT security into this loop is something that the computer industry can benefit from. So what if there's really hostile activity, right? Some bad guy's pointing Nessus at your server, or NetSpark, or any of the other, a Python scanning tool, right? So if Omens sees this kind of activity, it allows you to take action. You set these thresholds. If it sees whatever you want to set that threshold to, if I see 200 hits in my log, and I see 3 files have changed, shut down that server, or disable the network interface, or do all sorts of things. These are just batch files. Omens will sign these batch files, so it just won't run anything. When you make an Omens alarm, you tell Omens, okay, digitally sign that, and it will run that, unless it's changed. If that's changed, Omen will run that batch file. So Omen signs its configuration. You need a password to change the configuration. If you're really, really paranoid, you can use, I've implemented a PBKDF2 style iteration count. So yeah, I want to rehash this password 35,000 times. All right? So then when you decrypt, when you receive that email, you have to know, okay, this is the password, rehash it 35,000 times. It's just an extra sort of piece of the password that the bad guy may not know or shouldn't know. I'm using MD5, MD5-ish. I've implemented some countermeasures. They're common countermeasures. I haven't made anything up. I'm not an encryption person. So if you want to talk with me later about the kind of stuff I'm doing with MD5, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. Output can be encrypted, and output can be off-box via syslog. So as I developed Omens, initially it was just a scanner, and I was really happy with this. But then I started to think, okay, I have this information. Can I do anything with it? And since I'm scanning the logs and the files themselves, I can have an effect on the server on what's in those logs, what action I can take based on information from those logs, and what kind of action I can take based on whether Omens determines a file is hostile or not. So since Omens is a scanner, Omens itself won't block the IP. But what I've done is Omens can output either an IP security file, this is just an XML file that your IIS server can use to block. So I'm just telling IIS, if I find hostile IP addresses, if I find, this guy has hit my server 25 times, I'm going to put that in a file that IIS understands and will block that IP address now. So let the web server do the work. It also works with Apache. It will write out an htaccess file for Apache. I can also block a hostile file. Okay, I found a web shell. So do I just want to wait for someone to go look at that, or do I want to take some action? So what Omens can do is either set the hidden attribute, just set that file to hidden. IIS honors that. So if you set a file to hidden and you try to access that file, you'll get a 404 error. Apache does not honor the hidden file, so what Omens will do in that case is it will quarantine that file. Now if the bad guy keeps uploading that same file again, Omens will keep quarantining it. And it will do it up to 999 times. And it just appends a number to that quarantine file. Delete it from its original location, move it to another location, and then append a number on the end. So this is really sort of the meat of what I'd like to talk to folks about, is centralized signatures. Omens, even though it's host-based, allows centralized signatures, up to 10. Now, if somebody calls me up and says, I really need 25, okay, I'll recompile it for 25. 10 is an arbitrary number. Eventually, I may make that unlimited. But 10 just seemed like a good idea. And what this is two things. In an internal organization, if you've got 50 servers, Omens has its own configuration file that's for that server. You can also tell Omens, okay, go get a signature file from another web server. These are just flat text files. They're meant to be as simple as possible. And they are a way, if a central IT organization gets notification that there's one of the Omen servers is alarming, they can put an IP address in the centralized signature file. The next time any one of those Omen servers runs, and I typically schedule them every 2 hours. You can make them whenever you like, once a day, every half hour, it really doesn't matter, it's up to you. And I just use the Windows scheduler to do that. So every time one of those Omens, one of those servers with Omens on it runs, it will just do an HTTP GET. It's just a straight flat file. It will download it, load it up into memory, and say, okay, now I'm going to search for all of this. And then begin to alarm on whatever else is happening, what other server is getting that traffic, or getting that activity. So the signatures are additive. It's going to use the local signatures for each server. It's going to use the remote signatures. Meant to be really simple. 1.0, Omens version 1.0, which I'm going to release today, it now can share its signatures. So real quick, I don't want to dive into it, but let's say you've got a server that sees a tremendous amount of traffic. Omens may see some traffic that the other servers won't see. Omens notices this traffic, or notices in its logs that this traffic, this IP address, or this signature is happening. It then takes that and creates a signature that it puts in a centralized signature file, and now all the other servers can get that file. So in this way, you can sort of have this, and I'm going to develop this further. The idea is to get these servers to tell each other, hey, this is what's going on here. You may have not seen this traffic yet, but you probably will. And when you do, go ahead and tell IT security about that. So the next thing I really want to say is Omens is not designed to replace anything. We have great tools, people that spend years and years and years, people way, way smarter than me, selling you tools. I'm not saying get rid of any of them. I'm saying some of them can be bypassed. And I'm not saying that that's possible. I'm saying I see that. And so having a double check against what your other tools may miss, I have found very useful, right? So Omens and NIDs, why wait for the bad guy to send bad traffic on your network? If they've compromised your network and they've stuck a web shell on your server and they're just leaving it there, no traffic, why not have a way to find out that that's there and it has hostile content? So NIDs don't see SSL, but Omens can see everything because it's on the server, right? So everything eventually resolves to the server. That's why when you do forensics, when there's an intrusion, where do? You go to the server, because that's eventually where everything winds up. This is kind of the idea. Go to the place where you have the best likelihood of finding the greatest amount of information before the bad guy can gain access to your entire network. So it can act as a NIDS double check. It can allow admins and developers to participate, and it can react at the server level, block IP or block what may look like hostile files. And it can centralize the signatures. So Omens and WAFs. WAFs are great. WAFs really cut down on the amount of hostile traffic you'll see on your network, but they don't get rid of it. I still see, Omens still reports things that come through that have come through the WAF. And for anybody that reads about this stuff, WAF evasion is quite the sport for a whole segment of the red team guys. So WAFs are still generally network-based. They don't do file integrity checking, typically don't do file integrity checking. and WAFs are not real time. WAFs are real time and Omens isn't. Real quick, just to mention this, Omens is also meant to be used as a forensics tool. So if you go to a server that's already owned, you can run Omens against it to gain more information on what happened on that server. So not only as a monitor, but actually as a forensics tool. So WAFs are not really meant to encourage fixing the problem. Again, this isn't bashing in any way. WAFs are great, but WAFs say, okay, I'm not going to let this through. Omens is really designed to monitor. So I saw this. What I'm really trying to create is a way for people to say, I saw this, I should go check that out, I should go fix that. Because really that is what I think is ultimately the only way to address the problem. You have to fix it at the source. But again, not to bash WAFs, they do great work. So what am I going to do with this? Well, I'm here talking about it. It's taken me about 1.5 years to write this software. It's not anywhere near done. I'd call it about halfway done. I still have a head full of ideas on things I'd like to continue doing with it. I'm building it as a narrative, just so that you know what happens is I solve a problem. And then I think, well, but that doesn't solve this problem. So I solve another problem. Well, yeah, but what about this? So it's sort of a narrative I'm building to address deeper and deeper problems. Eventually, sorry about that. Eventually I'll move to asymmetric encryption, and eventually it'll have a nice web interface. It's command line now. I'm an old command line guy. I like command line, but I understand that web-based is the way that people centralize. So eventually I'll do that. Written in C, meant to be really fast. My opinion about applications, especially security applications, is the faster the better. So performance is really important to me. Omens is free. I've been given the permission by the people that I work for and have worked for. I've signed an agreement with the US government that they have an unlimited free license. So Omens will always be free no matter what to the US government. But that really doesn't matter to me because Omens is always going to be free to everybody as far as I'm concerned. This is where you can get it. BSidesLV.com, that's a server sitting in my house. I figure if I can't defend my own server, it really doesn't make much sense for me to talk to you about it. 1.0 is being released today. You can go right now. This is it, BSidesLV.com, BSides Las Vegas. That's the latest version. It will probably change as soon as I get back. But that's it if you want to take a look at it. This is me, I'm done. I have no time left, but if there's a quick question, I'll answer it, or if you want to hit me afterward.
How have you compared this with other hits like OSEC, and figure out how you're different?
I got to be honest with you. What I've done is mostly reading on other things that are available, and this is going to sound very poor, but what I'm looking for and trying to develop is something really, really, really simple. And when I look at a lot of the other tools available, they do a lot of really cool stuff. But unless I have a really good reason, I don't want Omens to become complicated. So I've tried to keep it very simple, and that's really probably the only delineating factor. Because it's really meant to, if anyone wants to see me install it and run it on my laptop, it takes 5 minutes. It's really very, very easy to do. And that's what I'm looking for, is for everybody to be able to do this. Am I out of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
You are exactly out of time, but the room's open.
Okay, great. Oh, really? Okay.
I mean,